So number one, what is the purpose? The purpose of the prophetic is to connect us. Connect us to what God is declaring, to what God is releasing, and what God is making available to us as individuals. Tonight, I would really like to challenge, where you currently are and assure you that the prophetic anointing has the ability to shift, whatever circumstance you may be facing now, no matter how difficult, whether it be illness, whether it be relationship breakdowns, whether it be difficulties at work, financial issues, financial constraints. I mean, the Western world and the Eastern world has gone through a fairly dramatic financial downturn. And, it has affected economies and the flow on is significant in various nations. But I mean, we are governed by a different economy. We are governed by heaven's economy. And in heaven's economy, there is no lack. We just need to learn how to access that. And one of the ways we can do that is through the prophetic anointing. And this is what the Lord is showing Ezekiel in this particular account. Okay, let's go to verse 10 and see what the young man does. See how he steps into this, how he begins to move into that prophetic anointing. And he literally fulfills what God has instructed him to do. Verse 10 says, "So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, an exceedingly great army." So what we see there is a real shift. We see the problem. We see God providing the young man with the solution to the problem. But then we see the man, he begins to engage the instructions or the counsels of the Lord. And through that, through the trumpeting of the word of the Lord into that particular circumstances, what we see is a real shift begins to take place. So, the purpose of the prophetic anointing is to bring change into our circumstances and into our lives. I shared with you guys when we were up there last year, Jesus taught the disciples a similar principle in the account of the fig tree. And he showed them and displayed to them how we bring change, how we bring a shift to those things in the natural circumstances. So let's continue on with its purpose. The purpose of the prophetic demonstrates to us, or demonstrates to our sphere of influence, heaven's intentions. And, we are called as Christians to exercise this sort of authority in the natural world. And we do this by prophesying. We do this by releasing the word of the Lord. And the word of the Lord is God's counsels over that circumstance. We teach our people in the schools that if they have infirmities in their bodies, that they literally prophesy life to their bodies. They command life, God's life, to come into their bodies. And through this particular method, we've seen many. We've had a lady just recently that's been in our school for quite some time. She contracted terminal cancer of the esophagus, and the medical prognosis was very, very dim. And they didn't hold much hope for Lynn's life. But she, we began to minister prophetically to. We began to prophesy life into that area. And we commanded that cancer to shrivel up and die, which was as large as a baseball inside of her stomach. And over a period of time, this thing began to shrink, and she stood on the word. She prophesied life to her body. She spoke to the illness and commanded life to come forth. And it wasn't all that very long ago that the doctors had given her a clean bill of health. And she's been released from this plague that hit her body so hard and so sudden. And ultimately, that's what God was using Ezekiel to do, or what he told Ezekiel to do in a different sort of a frame of reference. But that's ultimately one of the key purposes for the prophetic. Number 3, the purpose of the prophetic brings a shift to old paradigms so we can begin to embrace and step into the new. See, God is constantly doing new things. But, the old adage is, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing, yet expect a different result. And so often, we just do the same old, and we wonder why there's not a freshness and a newness to our walk. You know, as we begin to trumpet the word of the Lord, as we begin to embrace the prophetic anointing, those old paradigms will go out the window and make a way for the new oil of God's wine to begin to flow into our lives. Another important aspect of the prophetic anointing is it helps us to become more sensitive to the Lord's voice. And, this whole account of Ezekiel is literally him encountering the voice of the Lord. And that's part of the prophetic anointing, what it achieves. We find in our schools, we have people come to us from various backgrounds, and some have said to us they haven't heard the Lord's voice ever since they've been a Christian. And as they come and sit under that prophetic anointing, as the oil of revelation begins to flow upon their lives, suddenly their spiritual ears become unstopped, and they begin to hear and to recognize the Lord's voice. I had a chat with a lady in our school. She's a clinical psychologist, and she said to me before she came to the school, she was so dry, and her relationship with the Lord was just a step one, step two sort of relationship. But the prophetic anointing got on her, and she's starting to dream again. She's starting to hear again. She's starting to, sense the closeness of the Lord's voice. But, the prophetic anointing in her life, it began to shift some of the old mindsets and introduced into her current mindsets that, she can hear the Lord's voice. And finally, what is the purpose of the prophetic?